When people think about staying warm, they usually think in simple terms. Thicker means warmer. More fabric, more protection. But in real life, warmth doesn't depend on how much material you wear. It depends on how well your clothes can insulate. This is why some bulky garments fail, while lighter ones keep you comfortable for hours. To understand why insulation matters more than thickness, we need to look at what insulation actually is. What insulation actually is. Insulation is not about blocking cold. It's about slowing down heat loss. Your body constantly produces heat, and insulation works by keeping that heat close to you for longer. The most effective insulator in clothing is not fabric itself, but the air that fabric can trap and hold still. Good insulation creates a barrier of stable air between your body and the environment. That air slows the transfer of heat away from the skin. If the air stays in place, you stay warm. If it escapes, warmth disappears, no matter how thick the clothing looks. This is why insulation depends on structure, not mass. A garment that holds air in small, consistent pockets insulates better than a dense, heavy one that presses flat. Thickness can exist without insulation, but insulation cannot exist without air. Once you understand this, it becomes clear why adding more layers or heavier fabric often doesn't solve the problem of feeling cold. Why blocking cold is not the same as insulating. A common mistake is thinking that insulation means stopping cold from getting in. In reality, cold doesn't move, heat does. Your body loses heat to the surrounding environment, and insulation works by slowing that loss. Thick fabrics often block airflow, which feels protective, but airflow alone is not the main issue. When a garment only blocks air but doesn't trap heat effectively, it creates a false sense of warmth. First, you feel shielded. But as heat continues to escape through the material, the temperature inside the clothing slowly drops. This is why some clothes feel warm for a few minutes and then suddenly don't. True insulation keeps heat close to the body by holding air still. It doesn't rely on density or weight. Without trapped air, even the thickest fabric becomes just a barrier, not a thermal system. Blocking cold might stop wind, but insulation is what prevents your body heat from leaving. Confusing these two ideas is one of the main reasons people overdress and still feel cold. Air is the real insulator. Air is one of the best insulators available, and clothing uses it constantly, whether we realize it or not. The goal of insulation is to trap air and keep it from moving. When air stays still, it slows heat transfer and creates warmth. Fabrics that insulate well are designed to hold air in small, stable pockets. These pockets act like a buffer between your body and the outside environment. The more consistent and undisturbed those air pockets are, the warmer you feel. This is why lightweight materials with good structure can outperform thick, heavy ones. They don't need mass. They need space. Once air is squeezed out by pressure, moisture, or dense construction, insulation collapses. Heat escapes faster and warmth disappears. Understanding air as the main insulator changes how you look at clothing. Warmth is not something fabric provides directly. Fabric simply holds the air that does the real work. Why thickness fails without structure? Thickness by itself doesn't guarantee insulation. A fabric can be thick and still perform poorly if it lacks structure. Structure is what prevents material from collapsing under its own weight or under pressure from movement and gravity. When a thick fabric presses flat against the body, it loses the air pockets that create insulation. Heat then moves directly through the material and escapes into the surrounding space. The garment may look warm, but thermally it behaves like a thin layer. This is especially common with dense knits, heavy cotton blends, or tightly woven fabrics. They add bulk, but they don't resist compression. Over time they sink, stretch, and flatten, and warmth fades. Effective insulation depends on a fabric's ability to hold shape. Materials that maintain loft and bounce back after pressure keep air in place longer. Without that ability, thickness becomes decorative rather than functional. Loft, shape, and the space that holds heat. Loft is the ability of a material to stay raised and airy instead of collapsing. It's what creates the space where warm air can sit. The more consistent the loft, the more reliable the insulation. Shape matters because it determines how air is distributed inside a garment. Materials with texture, crimp, or spring naturally create small air chambers. These chambers slow heat loss and make warmth feel steady instead of temporary. Space is the hidden ingredient. Insulation doesn't come from fabric touching the skin. It comes from the space between layers. When clothes allow room for air to exist, warmth stays balanced and stable. This is why garments with good loft often feel warmer than thicker ones. They don't rely on mass. They rely on space. And once space disappears, insulation disappears with it. Compression and heat loss. Even the best insulation stops working when it's compressed. Compression forces air out of the spaces that hold warmth. This happens when you sit down, lean back, cross your arms, or layer clothing too tightly. When insulation is squeezed, heat escapes much faster. The fabric itself may still be there, but without air it can't slow heat loss. This is why warmth often disappears the moment you stop moving or change position. Compression also explains why insulation performance changes over time. A garment may feel warm at first, but as pressure builds and air pockets collapse, its effectiveness drops. This isn't a flaw in the material. It's a physical limit of how insulation works. Good insulation resists compression or recovers quickly after it. Poor insulation stays flattened. The difference is not thickness, but how well a material protects the space that holds heat. Insulation over time. Warmth is not a moment. It's a duration. Some clothes feel warm for a few minutes and then fail. Others stay comfortable for hours. The difference is how insulation behaves over time. As clothes are worn, they settle. Gravity, moisture, and movement slowly reduce loft. If a material can't recover its shape, air pockets disappear permanently. Heat loss increases even if nothing feels obviously wrong. This is why insulation quality matters more than first impressions. Immediate warmth often comes from blocking airflow. Long-lasting warmth comes from stable insulation that keeps air trapped despite pressure and wear. When insulation works well, temperature feels steady and predictable. When it doesn't, warmth fades gradually. Understanding this time factor explains why thicker clothes often disappoint during long indoor wear. Indoor versus outdoor insulation. Insulation behaves differently indoors and outdoors. Outside, movement and airflow help manage heat. The body stays active, and insulation mainly protects against wind and cold air. Indoors, the challenge changes. There is less movement, more stillness, and more time for heat loss to accumulate. Indoors, insulation must work without relying on activity. It needs to keep air trapped steadily, even when you're sitting or lying down. Many thick garments are designed for outdoor use and short exposure, not for long, quiet wear. This is why people often feel colder at home than outside. Outdoor insulation blocks wind. Indoor insulation must preserve warmth over time. Materials that compress easily or lose loft struggle in indoor conditions, even if they perform well outdoors. Understanding this difference helps explain why thickness alone doesn't solve indoor cold. Insulation needs to be stable, not just bulky. Why light insulated layers win? Light, well-insulated layers outperform thick garments because they focus on air, not mass. They create multiple small air spaces instead of one heavy block of fabric. These spaces adapt better to movement and pressure. Light insulation also recovers more easily. When compressed, it springs back, restoring air pockets and warmth. Thick, dense fabrics often stay flattened once pressure is applied. Layered insulation spreads warmth evenly and reduces sudden heat loss. Instead of relying on one garment to do everything, warmth is distributed across several layers that work together. This is why effective warmth often feels lighter than expected. When insulation is doing its job, you don't need bulk. You need space, structure, and stability. The qualities light insulated layers are designed to provide.